So if someone of you has some strong convictions, it's time to lose them up. And let's follow what Ash Furrow is going to tell us about that. Please.
Hello. Wow. I'm excited. I'm excited for this. All right. So today we're going to talk about loosely held strong convictions, which is an incredibly vague title. I really appreciate you all coming because I don't know if I would have been convinced by something that wishy-washy. I'd like to start today by talking about a massive explosion that occurred 14 billion years ago. A tiny, tiny explosion occurred, and the amount of energy is literally astronomical. The explosion expanded out faster than the speed of light in all directions. And for 380,000 years afterward, the universe was so hot that atoms could not exist because the energy that electrons and protons shared was over, like it completely annihilated the gravity and electromagnetic forces that would form an atom with an electron orbiting a proton. So finally we expanded, and the universe had cooled down enough to the point where atoms could exist. Hydrogen. Just hydrogen. Luckily, the universe was not evenly distributed, because if it was, we wouldn't be here today. The differences in densities allowed gravity to pull hydrogen towards each other, and eventually pull them closer and closer. And it took a couple 100 million years, but eventually the first stars formed. The gravity of the hydrogen attracting one another pushed them and pushed them and pushed them until they literally fused together to form heavier elements like helium and carbon, which is what we're made out of, lots of other things. But eventually it couldn't push any further. It couldn't push the heavier elements together enough in order to keep the fusion reaction going, and the star exploded in a massive supernova, spewing stellar matter into the universe. And this first generation of stars led to the creation, or created, heavier elements that later formed stellar dust, which formed asteroids and planets and Earth. And the Big Bang really started a series of events into motion that led you all here today. So I want you to think about the fact that we are all made out of stars, that everyone you've ever known, everyone who has ever lived, was born in the heart of a supernova. Pretty cool, huh? I know, right? Neil deGrasse Tyson, probably the coolest scientist ever, said, "We are all connected to each other biologically, to the Earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically." I love this idea, that we are all together and we're all in this together, that there is no real difference between life, that we're connected to all living things through biology, and we're connected to all objects on Earth chemically, and connected to everything that exists in terms of atoms. So let's talk about strong convictions that are loosely held. These are things that we can believe in wholeheartedly, ideas that we can commit our lives to, but we can change when it makes sense. We're going to talk about 4 things today. We're going to talk about how humans jump to conclusions, and iOS developers are humans, so by transitivity, iOS developers jump to conclusions. We're going to talk about how we silo ourselves, again, as a human species, but also as iOS developers. We're going to talk about how we sometimes dismiss each other, and how we often demand justification where none needs to be given. This might sound like a sort of depressing talk, and I swear it's not. It's going to be okay. We're going to have a lot of fun today. This is a really fun talk. I've had a blast preparing it. I really hope that you enjoy it. And I want to start with a game. Actually, it's an idea for a game that I had. It's called a jump to conclusions mat. It's a mat that you put on the floor, and it has different conclusions on it that you can jump to. Pretty great idea. The problem is, I've done some market research. Humans don't need a mat in order to jump to conclusions. It is something that we do naturally. Has anyone seen this quiz? It came up a couple months ago in the New York Times. Basically, it gave you a sequence of 3 numbers, 2, 4, and 8. And it says it obeys a rule. And you can give it any sequence of 3 numbers and ask, does this obey the rule? And it will say yes or no. Your goal was to try and figure out what the rule was by testing many sequences, as many as you like, but you can only guess once. After that, it's over. So 2, 4, 8, I figured, okay, that makes sense. How about 8, 16, 32? Oh, that works too. Great. How about 100, 200, 400? Works. So I type my answer, just has to double every time. Wrong. I lost. The rule is that the 3 numbers have to increase. So 1, 2, 3, 98, 99, 100, 0, 5, a million, whatever. As long as they increase every time, it obeys the rule. Now, I only looked for evidence that supported my existing hypothesis. I thought, hey, the numbers double each time, so that must be it. I didn't look for a counterexample. I didn't try and prove myself wrong. I jumped to a conclusion. This relates to something called the DeGrasse model of skill acquisition. This is a framework in psychology, less of a framework and more of a description. It's not something that you follow. It's something that describes how people learn things. Skill acquisition could be how to bake a cake, or, more germane, how to write an iOS application. There are 5 stages: novice, advanced beginner, competent, proficient, and expert. These are the general phases through which we go in order to learn a skill, to acquire a skill and expertise. Now, we don't always make it to the later stages. Either we stay at existing stage or we stop the activity. And that's totally fine. We don't have to make it to the end every time. But importantly, you can't skip a stage. You can't go from novice to expert overnight. It's impossible. The 5 stages are described as follows. Novice has a rigid adherence to a set of rules. They believe that if they follow a recipe, they follow a plan, then that is how they guarantee success. This is how we do things as humans. I'm not talking about some other people. I'm talking about in general. There is no exercise of discretionary judgment. These are the steps that I follow to build an app or bake a cake. Next, we have advanced beginner, which you start to see some situational perception. They notice that some rules work better in some situations than other rules in other situations. This is good. But all aspect of the work is seen as being equally important. So every aspect of baking a cake, mixing the flour and the eggs, baking it in the oven for the correct time at the correct temperature, that's seen as 2 equally important things. Next, we have competent. This is a really interesting stage because you have to cope with crowdedness. There is so much information and so many rules that it becomes very difficult for our learner to continue to learn. It's very easy to get discouraged at this stage. They've accumulated so much information, they don't know what to do with it all. They start to perceive how their actions affect the likelihood of success. So they see if they do one thing, it works better and helps them achieve a goal more often than another. They plan and they form routines. This is a really important stage. It leads us to proficiency, where someone has a holistic view of a problem. They know how to build an iOS application from end to end. They can prioritize important aspects of the application or the cake. And they can perceive deviations from the plan. So they can tell that a plan is more of a set of guidelines that can be changed and ignored at certain times. Instead of having rules, they have maxims. They have guiding principles that show them how to do something. And they can adapt to individual situations based on those maxims. Finally, we have expertise, where someone transcends the reliance on rules, on guidelines, and on maxims. They can do as they like because they have an intuitive grasp of the situation based on a deep, fundamental, and tacit understanding of what they're doing. Someone who's an expert baker doesn't need to read a recipe book. It's completely, their need for a recipe book has been completely obviated. They don't have a vision of what they're going to do. They have a vision of what is possible. And when they come up with a new situation that they've not faced before, they approach it with analysis. They analyze what they need to do in order to achieve their goal. That is amazing. I love this progression of a young mind growing into something that is powerful. But as beginners, we crave rules. This is normal. A beginner just wants to be told the recipe. They don't want to be told about how baking soda interacts with UI application delegate. They don't want to be told that singletons are sometimes okay. They don't want to be told to use one library or another. They just want to be told what to do so they can achieve their goal, so they can build an application or a cake. The problem is there are no rules. As we grow from beginner to novice to expert, we understand that there is no rule to building an iOS application. Expertise is not a set of rules that you understand and you can memorize, or you have memorized and you can recite. Expertise is just informed opinion. And as we learn, we grow more and more to understand this. But it's intoxicating as someone who has achieved advanced beginner or above. It's intoxicating to take a look at our opinions and our beliefs, and when someone asks us for a rule, that we give them our opinion. It's intoxicating because we want to treat our opinions as facts, and we want to give those facts out as though they are rules to be followed. People make decisions based on their own experiences, and people with different experiences and different preferences will have different opinions about what to do. We're going to come back to that a little later. For now, I want to talk about siloing. Has anyone ever heard of siloing in terms of the activity? Okay, well, silos seem friendly. These are grain silos in Texas. I use this picture because Wikipedia had it for free. When you hear silo, it sounds kind of friendly. The idea is that we can separate different crops into different silos so we can store them individually. With people, siloing refers to the idea that we group individual people together in silos because they share something in common. We might silo ourselves off from people who are different, for example, iOS developers versus everyone else, or we might silo someone else based on something that makes them different, Android versus us. People think of siloing and they don't think it's a really bad thing. They acknowledge that it may be a problem, but it's not really something that deserves urgent attention because they think of grain silos. In fact, I don't. I don't think of grain silos. I think of nuclear silos. I think about a species who almost destroyed itself by pointing these at each other over a difference of political ideology and opinion. We put ourselves metaphorically and literally inside silos and almost destroyed each other and ourselves. Whoa. So siloing, I submit that it might be a bigger problem than we think. That's kind of heavy. Let's see a comic. Has anyone ever seen this comic? Actually, I don't care. This comic guy says, oh, what's this? It's a flag. It says Team A. Someone else comes along. He's got a flag. It says Team B. Huh. Wow, fuck that guy. You're all laughing because you've all seen this in others, and I think, if we're being honest, we've seen it in ourselves. Why does this happen? This is a form of siloing, And the answer, I guess, can be related to evolution. I mean, for a long time, most of our existence, it's been beneficial to silo people because we only saw maybe 100, if we were lucky, 200 people in our entire lives for the most of human history. We had a very limited set of peers. And if we could protect and help people who were like us, that's because they are more likely to share our DNA, which is evolutionarily advantageous. So now we still do this, even though it makes no sense. And even though we've developed a set of morals that tell us it's wrong. Another problem is society. It's really profitable for the media to reinforce existing ideas that we have about each other, to tell us that we're right. This idea has existed for a long time, but we have been studying it for a long time too. Freud called this der Narzissmus der kleinen Differenzen. My German's really terrible. This means the narcissism of small differences. Freud said the phenomenon that is precisely communities with adjoining territories and related to each other in other ways as well, who are engaged in constant feuds and ridiculing each other. Such sensitivities to just these details of differentiation. What he's trying to say, I think, is Freud, is that we focus on the small differences that separate us from one another, instead of appreciating and celebrating everything that makes us awesome, that we have in common. Ayaka from Venmo tweeted this a little while ago. It's so easy to get pigeonholed into iOS. Many companies have an iOS engineering job listing separate from the software engineer, which is strange. She's right. She's really right. All computers, I mean, with very rare exception, every computer I've ever interacted with has operated on something called a von Neumann architecture. Input, output, processing, and RAM storage. That's every computer, isn't it? I mean, have you ever used a computer that didn't have those four things? Possibly, I guess, but I mean, in that context, is the difference between iOS and Android so different? They're all computers. Why do we focus on the difference between programming languages instead of celebrating how we're both building mobile applications that have constrained batteries and need to really concentrate the resource usage that they have? Is the difference between iOS and Android so big? What about other things? What about mobile and web? What about software engineering and baking a cake? Neil Gaiman has this amazing quote, and Randall Munroe made this comic. I'll read it to you. Everybody has a secret world inside of them. All the people of the whole world. I mean everybody. No matter how dull and boring they are on the outside, inside they've got unimaginable, magnificent, wonderful, stupid, amazing worlds. Not just one world, hundreds of them, thousands maybe. Unimaginable. What did he mean by that? I don't think he meant awesome or magnificent, because he said that already. I think he meant that we literally cannot imagine it. I think that he meant it's unknowable. I think that we need to recognize that people, every person, has all of these things inside of them that inform their entire life. And we can never know 100% what someone is and who they are. We don't really have to. If we recognize that all decisions are made in a context, that everyone has a different context, and we can never fully understand it, I think that would be really great. If we can recognize that people have different levels of experience, different preferences, they're in different moods, maybe they're familiar with some tools and not others, if they're under pressure at work, or if they have a really great team, or maybe not so much. I think that if we recognize that, we might be a little bit easier on each other, because people are amazing. Thousands of worlds, secret worlds inside of each one of us that no one besides us can ever know. That sounds awesome. I think that we need to start appreciating that that exists, and every person has that. The fact of the matter is that we evolved for a society of maybe 200 people. Our brains have evolved for that sort of society, and our brains can't handle our scale. The human mind does not scale to Facebook. Keep in mind the secret worlds. Everybody has them. You cannot know them, but you don't have to. Just appreciate that they're there. Give others the benefit of the doubt, and give yourself the benefit of the doubt. If you make a decision and then later on you wonder, why did I do that? Remember, it made sense to you at the time. Every decision, pretty much, that has ever been made has made sense to the person who made it when they made it. All right. That's a lot of heavy stuff. Let's talk about indie rock. This is one of my favorite bands, Tokyo Police Club. They're not actually from Tokyo, they're from Montreal. That's Montreal, not Montreal. There's a song that they have in this album about wanting to know everything about someone. They wanted to know everything about someone. The song is called Favorite Color, and the main lyric is, tell me, what's your favorite color? My favorite color is #398CCC. Thank you. It's actually this blue right here. That's my favorite color. And a question you could ask is, why? That's a great question. I don't have a good answer. I just like it. It wasn't always my favorite color. When I was 5, I had a different color. I had a different favorite color. When I was 25, I had a different favorite color. It's changed, you know? Preferences change. Why do preferences exist? The English like Marmite. I don't. But I need to acknowledge that someday I might. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible. We don't need justifications for things like preferences. So let's put that song lyric in a different context. Tell me, what's your favorite programming language? Mine is Swift. Before Swift, it was Objective-C. Before Objective-C, it was C#. Before that, I didn't really have an informed enough opinion to have a favorite programming language. So when someone asks, why is your favorite programming language Swift? I get this feeling inside of me. Why do I need to justify my preference to you? When I had a favorite color and you asked why that's my favorite color, well, I mean, that makes sense. Maybe it has a story behind it. But when you ask why Swift is my favorite programming language, the implicit question is, please justify your preference to me. And that would make no sense for a color, would it? So why does it make sense for a programming language? I used to have a different favorite color. I used to have a different favorite programming language. These preferences are more alike than they might seem at first glance. We demand justification for personal preferences. When someone says they like something or don't, when someone says, I don't like singletons, we ask them why. Justify your answer. We do it of each other, and we do it of ourselves. We put enormous pressure on ourselves in order to justify to just ourselves why we like something, why our favorite programming language is Swift or something else, why we like one library or another, why we like one operating system or another. We don't have to do this. And it's okay to change our minds. I changed my favorite color. I changed my favorite programming language. This is the loosely part of loosely held strong convictions. Will Shipley tweeted earlier this year, in 1989, I saw Coco and said, I'll spend my life making it so everyone can use this. I feel that way about Swift now. I can't believe I programmed Objective-C for 26 years. What a crap shack of a language it is compared to Swift. That's hilarious, but it illustrates my point perfectly. 26 years ago, Will Shipley said, I'll spend my life making it so everyone can use this. And he changed his mind because something else came out and he liked it more. He has a preference for Swift now, and now he has an equally strong conviction towards it, and he's thrown away his old conviction. You can't tell me that wanting to spend your entire life doing something isn't a strong conviction. And you can't tell me that throwing it away just because you like a new thing better isn't loosely held. He changed his mind, and we can too. There's this quote from economists, that's it. They say, and there's no real original citation for this, I tried to find one. They say, when the facts change, I change my opinion. What do you do? Well, I submit, when my feelings change, I change my mind. What do you do? We can change our minds on something, even something fundamental like our life's work, and we can do it on a whim. I started this talk with a fairly depressing agenda, and I told you that it would be fun, and I'd like to turn those 4 points around. I'd like to say that we can appreciate each other's ideas, that we can explore new things that other people like, and we can try them, and we can experiment with them, and we can learn new things, and maybe we'll even like them. From a molecular perspective, no two humans are different. From an atomic perspective, there's no difference between me and that chair. So does iOS versus Android really matter that much? We are such amazing creatures, and we are only very, very, very barely aware of our place in the universe. We should appreciate that fact. We need to feel adequately small, but amazingly large, because we are. Let's let other people make mistakes, even if we disagree with their choices. Let's not try and save each other from ourselves. I told you at the beginning of the talk the history of the universe and the history of matter. Humans, everyone who's ever lived, everyone you've ever known, everyone you've ever loved, was born in the heart of a star. If we're born in stars, then we should probably act like it. Thank you.
Does anybody have a question?
Ash, you are my star.
So, anybody?
It's a pretty high-level talk.
Well, I guess that's it. So we should.
Okay. Thank you very much.